From the North Country, where it's 7 degrees, going to be below zero tonight. I think I went the wrong direction. There are no golf courses open in Minnesota. Good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary on this very active Thursday edition. I'll tell you what, the guy just continues to make news. Donald Trump, whether you like it or not, had a very contentious call with an Australian prime minister. We'll get to that in just a moment. But at the National Prayer Breakfast today, the president made some news. He vowed to destroy the Johnson Amendment, which, of course, prevents religious groups and churches from engaging in political activities. Now, what does this mean? This means that the Mormons, this means that the Catholic Church, this means that the evangelicals, this means that the synagogues, this means that the mosques can get involved in politics. If I have my facts correct, I believe I do. Here's the president.
It was the great Thomas Jefferson who said, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty." Jefferson asked, can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Among those freedoms is the right to worship according to our own beliefs. That is why I will get rid of and totally destroy the Johnson Amendment and allow our representatives of faith to speak freely and without fear of retribution. I will do that, remember.
Okay. The president added that the freedom of a religion is a sacred right, but that it is also under threat. Sean Spicer talked about that at the briefing today.
Obviously, it's important to the president. It was throughout the campaign. It's something that he addressed this morning, and it's something that he's committed to. He talked about in terms of the executive orders and allowing Christian minorities in key countries seek asylum in the United States. He recognizes that in so many nations, these are the oppressed groups in accordance with how the UN defines refugees. So I think you'll see further guidance with that.
It's been a two great days for conservatives in this country, for the Christian right. First, you get Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. He's going to get nominated. He's been nominated. He's going to get confirmed. There's no question about that. And now this, destroy the Johnson Amendment. So the right wing, the conservative right, is getting exactly what this president said he was going to deliver. It was in the third debate in Las Vegas where the president, who now is president, where Donald Trump talked about how he would put someone on the Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade. And there hasn't been much conversation about that in the last 48 hours. But this is a shift for the country. This proves that this is an election of change. Ed Martin joins us, president of the Eagle Forum, former Missouri Republican Party chair. Ed, good to have you with us.
Hey, great to be with you, Ed. You know, as I'm listening, one thing I want to point out, the thing about the Johnson Amendment, the Eagle Forum Education Legal Defense Fund is the full name. It's a 501c3. And the Johnson Amendment is something that targets any 501c3 nonprofit entity under the tax code, which is all the churches, as you point out. Most of them are actually incorporated. But it also applies to other nonprofits, so it's say National Right to Life. They have 501c3. They tend to have a C4 component that's allowed to be political, but every C3 you can think of, from the Boy Scouts to a university, they can all now say, and the specific provision under the Johnson Amendment that's been forbidden is to endorse candidates. So you can say things, Eagle Forum, on behalf of my organization, I can say, pro-life is better than pro-choice, but I can't endorse Donald Trump, the organization. Now you would have all these organizations able to endorse candidates, and it's not just churches, actually. It could be any 501c3, and it's if you're a conservative or if you like that provision, if you like getting rid of that provision, you say give everybody free speech. But it's actually been around since Johnson. It's been something that's been around. It's a big change. You're right to point to it.
It prohibits churches and other tax-exempt organizations from endorsing political candidates. So as you just explained, that changes. And repealing the amendment would allow religious organizations to engage in partisan political activities without losing.
The stereotype is that the pastor gets up in the pulpit, he can say, I'm pro-life, you should be too, but he can't say vote Trump. now he would be able to get up in the pulpit and say, vote Trump. But the bigger point, actually, is it would affect every 501c3. In other words, you could now, remember, you could now give money, tax-deductible money. Ed, you want some of your, the left to go crazy. You talk about dark money. You could give $1 million to a 501c3 nonprofit now, and that organization could say, vote Trump. So you're changing dramatically the way money flows into politics. You are. I'm for it, but I'm also stunned that it's happening this fast if it really is going to happen.
Okay, let me give you a scenario here. Let's say that someone who is, I hate the term pro-life. We're all pro-life. Nobody wants to see anybody's, okay, but, anti-abortionists, all right? I guess we could put it that way. Someone who does not want to see abortions take place in this country and would term themselves as pro-life. All right, let's just say that this person decides to give so much money to a church if they can get the clergy to go in front of the congregation and say, you know what, we've really got this candidate who is all a part and all proponent of our values. Can you tell your congregation this is what they should do on Tuesday? That's how it works, right?
Well, I mean, that certainly could be. You could say if you're a big donor to the First, Baptist Church of St. Louis, and you go to the pastor and say, I got $1 million. I want to give you $1 million to your 501c3 church, but I want to know if you're going to preach from the pulpit for Donald Trump. And if he says, yes, I am, you give him $1 million. I mean, now, the comeback from conservatives is there's lots of organizations that, do this already. Sometimes people give money to the, unions. They give money to different organizations. But so this is a free speech. But you're exactly right. I mean, this is an extraordinary shift. If he really is able to destroy the Johnson Amendment, it changes a lot of things. And by the way, 501c3 contributions are tax deductible. So Ed Schultz can give me $1 million to promote anti-abortion policies at Eagle Forum Fund. And I can take your money, you can take the deduction, and I can say vote Trump. That's the change. It's dramatic. It's a huge deal.
And let's go right to it. In the Catholic Church now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that in 2004, when Tom Daschle lost his seat to John Thune in South Dakota, there were a couple of priests who did go in front of the congregation, and some of the Democrats thought it was really illegal, who said that there is really only one candidate who is pro-life, and you know who that is. And they thought that, of course, broke the law. And, it was late. It was late in the campaign, and the pushback to that only had a few days, and so it never really became an issue. Next thing you know, John Thune defeats the Senate Minority Leader. Which was sweeping.
I'm in St. Louis. The Archbishop of St. Louis is the guy who was up there in South Dakota as the bishop up there, and you're exactly right. He organized the campaign. He's told the story, and he put in place people, and they got up in the pulpit, and I think they probably tried to nuance it a little, say you can't vote for a guy like Daschle or whatever. But you're right. That was a flashpoint. That would all be off the table. There would be, and by the way, you and I could start the Church of the Eds. And we get a 501c3 and start our own church, solicit lots of money that's tax deductible, and endorse whoever we want. You have to be named Ed for president, but that's right. It's really a wide open field in a lot of ways that we don't even know yet.
Okay, Ed Martin, president of the Eagle Forum, our perfect guest today on this issue, as of course Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has vowed to destroy the Johnson Amendment. There is other news surrounding the president. Apparently, he had a pretty rough call with the Australian president. Here's John McCain talking about the Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who was, according to sources in the Washington Post, if you want to believe it or not, who are quoting unidentified sources inside the administration, senior administration officials. It's almost as if they wanted this to leak out. But Mr. Trump talked about his inauguration, the size of his crowd. He also chastised the Prime Minister from Australia for a refugee deal that was struck before he took office that dealt with some 1,250 refugees that were supposed to come to the United States. They got into it about that. It was not a good call. In fact, Trump told the Prime Minister, of all the leaders that I spoke with today, this is the worst call. Here's John McCain's reaction.
fought alongside us in wars, including losing over 500 brave Australians in the Vietnam War, which some of us remember. And this, in my view, was an unnecessary and frankly harmful open dispute over an issue which is not nearly important as United States-Australian cooperation and working together, including training of our Marines in Australia and other areas of military cooperation and intelligence.
They are going to question the competence of this president before it's over with. But John McCain, he rattles a lot of swords against political enemies, and there's no doubt the president is his political enemy. Well, the president was tweeting overnight. Yesterday, I was at the briefing, and I was wondering, as soon as former General Mike Flynn came in the room, National Security Advisor, I said, oh, something's up. And he had a pamphlet with him, so I knew he was going to speak. Sure enough, he got up and put Iran on notice. Well, overnight, the president tweeted, and he said, Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile, should have been thankful for the terrible deal the U.S. made with them. That's what he tweeted last night. Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, responded.
I wish he would sleep more and tweet less, but that's up to him. Whatever he's doing has worked for him. But, you're still president of the United States, and there's probably better ways to handle this. Instead of talking about this, we should be talking about Judge Gorsuch.
The point I want to make here, Ed Martin, is that this seems to be so normal now that the shock jock value is gone. And it's just the president. There he is again. Let's start with the call to the Australian Prime Minister. What do you make of it? I mean, is there a level of embarrassment here, or what?
Well, I mean, when you and I probably both know we've had someone listen to one side of the conversation. I think in the other, the Mexican president has come out and said what was reported wasn't the whole conversation. I don't know. Look, Donald Trump now has established himself. He's a guy with a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, maybe it's a euphemism, bravado. I mean, he comes on strong. He's kind of what my grandfather would call a character. I think sometimes you and I and maybe John McCain, blanch at the approach. On the other hand, as Lindsey Graham said, it kind of works for him, and I think they're going to be fine. The Australians aren't going to go anywhere, and I think they'll settle into a rhythm. I think the Iranian thing is a little bit more substantial, and I think if the message from Flynn was, guys, get in line, what the tweet means maybe is a reinforcement of that. But as you say, the new normal is pretty exhausting. And I think the one thing I would say, I don't know if you're watching this, Ed, if you look at Reince Priebus or look at even the president, you remember how fast this wears out these men at this point, say men, in terms of the physical appearance? It's hard to do this job like they're doing, and I wonder about the stamina to be able to do this. This ages people, and then you start to say, can you do it 24 hours a day like they're doing it and not start to have mistakes? And I think that's the other problem. So I don't know. I enjoy it, of course, because I think Trump is wonderful fun, but I do worry about it too, and I think it keeps everybody on edge, which is another problem.
Well, there's another guy that's keeping a lot of people on the left on edge, and that's Steve Bannon. Nancy Pelosi flat out labeled him a racist who has no business sitting on the National Security Council. It's stunning thing that a white supremacist is on the National Security Council. She told reporters in the Capitol. I mean, she's very outspoken about it. Bannon clearly has the ear of the president on a level of influence. He has now surpassed the level of importance of Karl Rove inside the Bush administration. Is Steve Bannon going to be a problem for conservatives? I mean, he seems to be the change master here. There's some things that have happened so far that conservatives are really happy about, but Bannon seems to be a guy that wants the president to saber rattle. Telling a country in the Middle East that you're on notice and doing it without definition might classify for a definition of reckless, which, of course, is what Nancy Pelosi called Donald Trump on a CNN town hall earlier this week. I mean, isn't this bravado? We're a little bit beyond bravado. Is it smart to say, openly that you're on notice. Why wouldn't you do that through diplomats as opposed to do it through the international media? What do you think?
Well, two observations. Number one is when anyone, you and I have been observers of politics or participants, becomes the focus of attention to the extent Steve Bannon is, you start to get worried about it. I mean, it's a difficult thing. He's on the front page of the cover of Time now. I mean, you don't want to become too hot. And, he doesn't go to the Alfalfa Club party or whatever that thing was called. He doesn't go out like that. But he's becoming almost too conspicuous. So that's the first observation, and that's intentional. I think there's a point where everybody's decided you can't. This president does not seem to be diminished by otherwise normal criticism. So let's take another target. But the second thing is this. I encourage people to read Bannon's speech to the Vatican a few years ago. He's actually an interesting guy. He's critical of capitalism that is run amok without Judeo-Christian roots, in other words, morality and ethics. I think there's some things he's doing, as you point out, that are not so-called conservative the way the Republican Party thinks, and that's actually sort of populist and what people want. Another example, by the way, what's coming is if they do a multi-trillion-dollar or trillion-dollar infrastructure bill, the so-called conservatives in the Republican Party are going to be upset, and I think Bannon's going to say is driving it with jobs. So, yes, he's a hot commodity, but I think he's actually really the guy for the job in terms of challenging the status quo, and I think he's doing a pretty darn good job, and I don't think he's going anywhere. If anything, he's getting more power solidified in so many ways. So,
and I got to tell you, the liberals think he is terribly dangerous. I mean, his view of Islam is confrontational. He wants a religious war. And there's a shot over the bow at Iran. There's military experts out there that say that the ballistic missile they tested wouldn't carry a warhead anyway. I don't know. It's all pretty scary. So some cold water's got to be thrown on this. Let's just put it this way: that Rex Tillerson's got a hell of a job.
Hey, sure, that's for sure. I do think. I do think you're right about that. Just briefly, we got to get some of these cabinet secretaries in to start to do some of this work. And
that was my next discussion point. The activities. Let me just profoundly point out: the Democrats have the filibuster in the Senate, and that's it. They can skip votes. They can protest. They can stand out wherever they want and scream and holler. The Democrats, you know where they are right now? They are down to voter registration and rallies. That's where the Democrats are right now. That they're down to going out and having an unbelievable drive of voter registration and a bunch of rallies and social media. Because right now in Washington, they are powerless other than the filibuster. If the founding fathers had not given the minority voice an opportunity to participate in this government, the Democrats in 2017 would be left for dead. I mean, folks, that's a fact. That's where they are right now. And no one is reporting it like this. This president is in position to get everything he wants. Everything.
Yeah. It is extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but let me point out something that's here. I thought you were going to say next. If you remember in 2009, Obama had not exactly the same position, but close, and he got a lot of what he wanted, and then it whipped back on him politically, right? I mean, the question becomes, is this a 100-day or a one-year success story, and then the thing whips back, or what? And the Senate map in 18 doesn't line up for the Democrats, so maybe it's longer, but it is politics ebbs and flows, and I wonder about when it's going to stop flowing and when it might start ebbing.
I don't think it is, because I think Trump is not bought and paid for by anybody. That's what makes him somewhat dangerous. He's going to be able to go back to the American people and say, I did 100 days worth of business in 10 days. Okay? That's what I did. This is going to be the most active 100 days of a sitting president than we've ever seen in history. That's what I think. And why? Yeah. Because he's not Washington, and he is not bought and paid for, and he has no loyalty to anybody. And I'm reporting what's happening. I'm reporting the profound. I'm not a big Trump supporter. I don't agree with. Of course, the Republicans have got to get their head together on health care, and that is a big issue of mine. I don't want Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security touched. I believe we paid for that and we deserve it. Our government ought to be able to deliver that. That's the core of where I'm at. I don't want the New Deal destroyed, but I'm just reporting that Trump's in a position to do it all. He's in position to get it done. And I think that what he'll do is that he'll go on Capitol Hill. He'll cut some deals with some legislators because all they want to do, Ed, is get reelected.
Right.
Yeah, and,
That's right.
and he'll figure that out, and he'll get exactly what he wants. That's my prediction. This is going to be a rough run for liberals and progressives, and they're down to the rallies and the voter registration. Your final word.
Well, I think you're right. Although I do think in politics, whenever you think you got it figured out, especially this gentleman, it changes. But I do think I agree with you on this. He has an incredible feel for the voters. I'm out in Missouri, in the Midwest. The voters are with him on these things he's doing, the refugee pause, all these things. And I agree with you. Most of the Republicans just want to get reelected, and they're not going to get in the way of him. So it is going to be an interesting 100 days. I just don't know if I can keep up. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of winning so much, Ed.
He's at a torrid pace, there's no doubt. Ed Martin, always good to visit. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed.
You bet. Ed Martin, president of the Eagle Forum, former Missouri Republican Party chair. I'm just reporting the facts, and I know I'm going to get hammered on Facebook saying I'm a Trump guy. I'm not. I'm a reporter, and I'm stating it profoundly. This is where we are. When we come back, more on the prayer breakfast. Stay with us.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Well, how's this a good way to end the podcast today? With Trump, there's a first with everything because we've never seen anything like this. Now, at the National Prayer Breakfast, it's traditional that the President of the United States shows up. So Trump was there. There was some question whether he was going to show up or not, but he did. Only Trump can turn the National Prayer Breakfast into a roast. He asked for prayers for Arnold Schwarzenegger, tongue-in-cheek, so the ratings of The Apprentice would go up. And Schwarzenegger responded. I mean, this is really, presidentially, this is amazing stuff. You know the old saying, you can't make this up? I guess that's it at this point. But here's Trump talking at the National Prayer Breakfast.
I had to leave the show. That's when I knew for sure I was doing it. And they hired a big movie star, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to take my place. And we know how that turned out. The ratings went right down the tubes. It's been a total disaster. And Mark will never, ever bet against Trump again. And I want to just pray for Arnold, if we can, for those ratings, okay?
It's just unbelievable. Black History Month started yesterday, and Trump had African Americans in the White House, and he talked about himself. He goes to the National Prayer Breakfast, and he talks about himself. If you remember the prayer breakfasts with past presidents, it's rather a reverend moment, so to speak, a solemn moment, a moment of reflection and seriousness. Only Trump could talk about himself, The Apprentice, and the ratings, and tongue-in-cheek say, let's pray for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Here's Schwarzenegger's response.
Hey, Donald, I have a great idea. Why don't we switch jobs? You take over TV because you're such an expert in ratings, and I take over your job. And then people can finally sleep comfortably again.
This is Ed Schultz, News and Commentary. We're back tomorrow.